Okay, we're on page 62 and 63, finishing up chapter 6. These last two pages of text, one is we begin with a summary of the three bodies, but it's actually more than a summary of the three bodies. It's basically a very succinct statement of what you could call the mind ground teaching, the direct pointing to one's inherent nature, of which he says he's the heir and he simply passes along, not something he invented. But all throughout this chapter, we've seen he's taken many practices or ideas or theories, even imagery that flows throughout the Buddhist teachings, and each time retranslated them or turned them back slightly to indicate that they're all pointing back to oneself, all pointing back to one's true nature. And so you could say the whole focus of attention, if you want to call this a religious tradition, is on the human and on the deeply human spiritual potential. All the devices, the meditations, the devotions, even the texts themselves are merely mirrors within which we're expected to, we're encouraged to find what the Buddha found in his own mind and own nature in our own selves. So this is very important to understand, because then these are things that you use. They're a means to an end, but they aren't the end themselves. So no matter how devout and how sincere you are, and this is really important to be devout and sincere, fundamentally you're working on an intrinsic capacity that is within each of us, and not looking outside for any kind of deliverance, salvation, special powers, signs, omens, nimitta, Chinese Jingjie, none of that. All of this is just coming back to oneself. So this last line here, we'll start at the top of 62, really puts it very tersely. Good and wise friends, the Dharma body, and you could say of a Buddha, is fundamentally complete, lacking nothing. To see your essential nature yourself in every moment of thought is the reward body of a Buddha. And the thoughts generated by this reward body are the transformed body of a Buddha. You yourself awakening and cultivating the merit and virtue of your essential nature is genuine taking refuge. The physical body is made of skin and flesh. It's just an inn you stay in and do not return to. Just awaken to the three bodies of your own essential nature, and you will recognize the Buddha of your own nature. So, if you want to reference back, you go back to page 59 and you see the listing of those three bodies. And now he's gone through a very elaborate explanation of these, and probably corrected a sensibility or understanding that people thought that these were metaphysical states, or even more that these were separate enlightened beings out there in the cosmos someplace, and each one had their little realm or their heaven that they dwelt in. And he's saying, actually not. When you're talking about a Buddha, you're talking about every living being's potential. You're not talking about an arrived deity or a static, always existing being, but rather an ongoing, ever-present potential in every person. So that Buddha, he says, the Dharma body of that Buddha is fundamentally complete, lacking nothing, which means our fundamental nature, our fundamental substance, essence, is also fundamentally complete, lacking nothing. So if you actually really interpret this, then all of the action in cultivating the spiritual, or cultivating what we call the return, is to simply realize that all the seeking, all the anxious worry and wanting and craving and grasping is really an illusion. It's really false. It's really hard to do because it's just so deeply ingrained from the moment we wake up, from the moment we're born. We're grasping for food and clothes and shelter, and beyond that, pleasures and things, and surrounding ourselves with these. And this grasping nature is really, according to this text, completely misguided, and will end in fruitlessness. It'll end in despair and emptiness, because whatever we think we're lacking and whatever we're thinking to go to get can in itself never fulfill, because everything's impermanent and passing, and because essentially we are whole and complete to begin with. And so it's, at the best, it's superfluous. At the worst, it's a drain of our essential energy. And we invest in this. We put a lot of energy into this. And it can be all over the place. When you think about what grasping is, it's not simply, material acquisitiveness. I mean, that's the most coarse form of grasping. But there's a subtle form of grasping that has to do with this gnawing sense of incompleteness or lack, or I don't measure up, or there's something missing, or an anxiety, a free-floating type of anxiety that I don't have depth, I don't have meaning, I don't have purpose. I'm adrift. And not adrift in the sense that you've started the return and you're adrift because you're pulling away from sort of the material certainty, but adrift in the sense that you have no core, no center. This feeling then leads to grasping, reaching out, attaching at all levels. Internally to states of mind and delusions of fantasies and pretension and so forth. Socially to almost all the contexts and things we set up. Even in our own families, these become sticky projections often of our unfulfilled wishes and desires, our hopes for, our transference of these hopes to the children, and so on and so forth. And it gets caught up in this whole thing of heightened expectations, seeking, wanting, and then either partial fulfillments or most often disappointments, and then we just go on and on and on. There's a wonderful passage in Mencius where he describes how day by day we start out in life, we start out early, whole, and complete, but then as we grow up, we constantly chip away and erode at our essentialness, so we actually get much older before our actual age. And we lose a kind of joie de vivre, a kind of joy of living in the simplest of things, because there's this endless pursuit of wanting and grasping. And he does a wonderful comparison. It's like nature. It's like this beautiful mountain that starts out pristine, pure, but then gradually cattle and sheep come and graze on it, and strip mining occurs, the equivalent then in China, and then the cutting down of the timber and whatnot, and it makes it come back. Leave it alone for a while, it starts to come back, but then again, it gets hit again, and after a while, it says, you never know this mountain was a beautiful paradise. It looks like just a burned out volcano or something. He says, so too with every person, we have this quality of this nature, but day by day, and then he metaphorically goes over, it also gets chipped and eaten and pulled away. And he says usually by two things, by unexamined impulses and desires within us that we don't really recognize where they're going, and by association with bad friends, including not a good livelihood. And as a result of that, we chip away and erode our essentially good nature. And he says in the end, sort of like, and you look in the mirror and wonder, who is this? How did this become this instead of that? And where did it all go? But then he goes back and says, it doesn't matter, there's always hope as long as you can turn back and find that again and stop the chipping away, which is really, in the Buddhist sense here, an internal process, because the chipping away comes from an unfulfilled sense of want and lacking and a desire. People have experienced sometimes the absence of this in different ways. Sometimes it's in a meditation retreat or a session. If you go for a number of days in a row where Your life has been very simplified in terms of food and shelter and the routine. And so the regimen of the discipline of simplicity and regularity can, in a sense, corral or subdue the sense organs. There's just not so much to look at. There's not so much to listen to and so forth. And as a result of that, there's this returning of this energy, like the mountain is being refreshed again. And in that time that happens, there's an incredible fullness, and one feels even healthier and younger again. And if you can really get to a point in your meditation during that retreat where the mind is gradually stilled and quieted and calmed, in that absence of anything going on, in that absence of total nothing going on, what's called true emptiness, suddenly there's a fullness that can be experienced. A wonderful fullness that just is in the fullness of being who one is at any one time right there in that moment. That's ineffable, it's indescribable because it's so simple. It's like suddenly I feel okay, whole and complete just in this moment and all of that. And of course that may not stay, that passes. But that is a glimpse into how one, when everything is dropped and let go of, it's not emptiness, it's not a kind of void, but it's a profound, wondrous existence, it's called, the fullness of one's life, and it's accessible at any moment. It's not something you get, it's something you already have and then cover over. So the retreat, again, is part of literally retreating from that outflowing, but it's a coming back to this natural fullness. And so this is what he's talking about. There's nothing lacking. It's whole and complete. Then he says to see your ascension, to see this in every moment of thought is a reward body. Now the reward body means it's kind of like a prize. It's the positive retribution of a life now that is centered and in that space. And that means that body, whatever you want to define that as, both real and say, how we say, metaphorical, the essence of your being is happy, it's full, it's complete. And that's coming from every moment being in that space. Now, I want to stress that being in that space is not so much an attainment, because somebody asked me, well, when do I get to that space? I've been reciting for 3 days now, and I'm, on the 4th day do I get to that space, or with 100,000 recitations do I get to that space? And it's not a space you get to, it's a state of mind, and it's a dynamic equilibrium. And this is how he describes it. It's a thought after thought, moment to moment, experience to experience. You stay centered in that essential nature. You're in the fullness of life. You're constantly responding to everything, and there's no place you're setting up, no place you're seeking. And so you just continue to enjoy, it's called the enjoyment or the reward body of this state. And then he says the thoughts generated. Now again, what this means is the karma of body, speech, and mind that is generated from this is a transformed body of the Buddha. It means all that you're doing, all that you're thinking, all that you're saying coming from this spot creates a wondrous existence, and it's transformed. Your thoughts, your ideas, your actions become transformed into, I would say, events of awakening. Now, what I mean by events of awakening, it not only expresses your inherent completeness, but it evokes that in others. So when others encounter it, and when you're involved in social engaged action and so forth, things really work out smoothly, and they really bring out the best in everybody. So it's not like necessarily this is a monastic existence or only a worldly. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It's wherever you are in this state, there's a radiance of that fullness and that light that then reaches. That's the transformation bodies. If you think of your own body, okay, my own body, your own body, has it changed? Well, yeah, some. At the time you came out of the womb, I know most of us don't remember that, but somebody took pictures because they thought it was a great big day, right? They said, this was the start of the world when I was born. And they have all these pictures, but you watch your body over time. How has it changed? Whoa, it's amazing. I told you this photographer did this incredible exhibit. Every day on a tripod, he had his camera, and every day he'd sit in the morning on the same stool right in front of the camera and had the remote and go, next day, for 65 years. And then what he did when he was all done, he took took 65 years of things and just put it together in a motion thing. And just ran it through, and just, whoa, I mean, talk about an awakening. He saw the actual, the first wrinkle, the first gray hair, over 65 years. And it's an amazing thing. I just saw a portion of it. He was a South American photographer who did this. But what you see there is we don't feel like we're changing every day, right? Every day I get up and look in the mirror, it's the same old me. But somebody who hasn't seen me for 3 months is like, whoa, you look like, if they're nice. And you think, well, what happened? You see this with children more. If you're watching children grow up, you can see the changes pretty quickly. But even if you're really close to them, you don't see it so much. I'll take a couple weeks off and come back, or a summer. I just visited a friend of mine, and this little girl went from a little girl to a young lady in, 6 months or something. And I went in and I was ready for the little girl, and it was a different person. And yet she was the same name, living in the same house with the same people, but her body had changed and her consciousness had changed. And so she had transformed. So our bodies are always transforming. Now, are they transforming by what mechanism? What's driving the change? It could be goodness, benevolence, clear thinking, and so forth, morality, or it could be the opposite. So in a sense, we are masters of this artwork. It becomes our worries, our anxieties, or it becomes our joys and liberations, and it shows. You can see it. It emanates. So we're transforming all the time. What this is saying is take charge of the transformation, directed. You think, I want to do art, I want to do pottery, I want to do fun. Yeah, it's not kind of fun, but do this art. This art is the biggest, the best. Transforming yourself, creating a Buddha out of this. Whoa, okay? But the other thing that happens is we transform others' bodies. When I start to think who I am in terms of my physical, my emotional, my mental, intellectual, it's some composite of every place I've been and every person I've met. And some more than others, like teachers and parents, very, very close friends at a certain time. They transform me. In Ulysses, the great poem, Ulysses, he says, I am a part of everything I've experienced, and I'm a part of every man I've met. It's a really wonderful poem, but it's a poem saying we are transforming and transformed in this interaction. So again, the importance of drawing near to good friends and good people then nurtures that. But we should also think that I am transforming other people I meet. Everybody who meets me picks up something. And so what is it that I'm giving off? And this is a way to think of transformation bodies. Don't think of them as like they're floating, disembodied ghosts or spirits out there. Oh, there's a transformation. No. It's like it's very real. It's very immediate. It's right here going on all the time. And in fact, a Buddha is nothing other than someone who's mastered the art of transformation. It's just, mastered that art of transformation, and thus the creative impulse, the creative energy is just really pure and complete. Then he says, if you yourself awakening, becoming aware of all this and cultivating the merit and virtue of your essential nature, this is genuine taking refuge. This is the genuine return. This is the port of anchor. If you're in that spot, that is the merit and virtue of your essential nature. When you return to the root and go back to the source, that's taking refuge. That is taking refuge. Now, the taking refuge in a ceremony, through a Dharma master, with the vows and everything, is important, but it's more or less symbolic. It's an intention on your part, but it's not a fulfillment yet. It's an intention. It's, I want to do this. I'm intending to do this. And often there's tears associated with this, if there's a genuine, because there's a transformation going on. I'm changing and moving in this direction. But it's not the goal yet. It's just the beginning. The goal is you go back to the root and go back to the service of your own nature. The return is the complete then. You transform yourself in getting rid of all the greed, anger, and stupidity. Oh, then it's complete. So the taking refuge is more like refuging. But that sounds funny. That sounds like going through garbage. Sorry. You put the ing, in other words. It's not I took refuge, but I am taking refuge. I am returning step by step, thought by thought, moment to moment. I'm always aware of my pole star. And my pole star is my essential nature, and I never leave that. I'm always guided and moving back towards that. Sometimes there's fog and it gets a little dim, and I have to rely on the foghorns to sort of stay centered, whatever that is. But then the clouds clear again and I can see that path. And so once you make this resolve, you never turn back. You may pause, you may take a side path, but you're in this direction transforming. He says, now in contrast, the physical body is made of skin and flesh. This is a very powerful metaphor. It's just an inn you stay in and do not return to. So you might think about that health club membership when it goes up. The membership will keep going, but your body won't. Just awaken to the three bodies of your essential nature, and you will recognize the Buddha of your own nature. So again, he's not saying disregard the physical body. We shouldn't misread this. He's simply saying, watch the level and intensity of your investment. Where are you investing? If you got it invested in what Dharma Master Hui Neng Empty Cloud called the skin bag, he wrote a poem called Song of the Skin Bag. Maybe next one of these classes we'll read the Song of the Skin Bag. Maybe Halloween, that would be great. But basically, it's a paean to the impermanence of the physical, but not a denial of it. It's just simply saying, use it and use it well, but do not think that this is a rock of Gibraltar, that this is my Savior and Lord, and this is going to deliver me. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Oh, this is like a song this nun wrote. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I don't know why everybody's making such a fuss over something that's just basically blood and pus. That was a nun I knew. She wrote that song. But you see ashes to ashes, dust to dust throughout traditions. You see the idea that, what Shakespeare called this mortal coil. And a lot of Shakespeare's writings, the sonnets and so forth, are concerned with, you might say preoccupied with, impermanence, the passing. And what are we to make of this? No matter what we reach out and grab for, it fades and even gold and bronze and whatnot, how much the things we love and this. So he's really into really confirming what I think the Sixth Patriarch is saying here, but he's not necessarily offering the essential nature as another place of refuge. He says this is awakened to your Buddha nature when you recognize this. Now, he says, I have an unconditioned verse for you. Again, the unconditioned verse, we wrestled with translating this. It's called markless, wuxiang. And when we were doing this, I said, well, what does markless mean? It didn't mean anything to English speakers. I said, I have a markless verse. You could think that means it's invisible or beyond compare, something that's markless. But what it really means is that it is true no matter what, without change, without alteration, because it's coming from the deep place of the mind ground. So it's not culturally conditioned, it's not historically conditioned, it's not true of one time and not true of another time. It's not true of certain peoples or ethnicities or anything. This is pointing to something that's true from the essential nature throughout the span of time and space. And that's what it means by it doesn't have a mark of coming into being, abiding, losing its relevance, and gone, like a pop song, okay, or like the news. How much poetry do we access now that will be in the future completely disregarded, not studied at all? We have tomes and tomes of works that at their time were really hot and popular, and now hardly anybody knows them or reads them. And things also in terms of, just my magazines I get. It's really funny, I get subscriptions to magazines because I have, I think I should keep up with things, and it's hopeless. Chuangzi said, this has a limited capacity. That is unlimited knowledge data. To use this to get that is foolish indeed. You'll never fill it. Nonetheless, I keep doing that. But the magazines pile up. And if I get really busy, the great news, New York Review of Books piles up, the New Yorker piles up. Usually I hit the cartoons, I get those, and then I say, I'm going to read the serious article later. What I found was, when I got the magazine, I'd read it the first week, the first article is usually about politics, the political scene. I go, wow, that's really prescient, that's cogent, that's insightful, blah, blah, blah. Wow, yeah. But then if I let it go, say in 3 or 4 months, 5 months, I pick it up, it's totally meaningless. That well-written political piece is totally passé now. It doesn't say anything. And in many ways, whatever it thought was going to happen didn't, and whatever it didn't predict happened. And so it's like, and I found I could save myself a lot of affliction with American political events just by not reading it. And then when you do read it, it's like 1890, 1920, 2010, 2006, what's the difference? What's the old song? It's still the same old story, a fight for love and glory, a case of do or die. The fundamental things don't change as time goes by. It's sort of like, oh, here's a war in a foreign land. Oh, really? Okay, and here's an incompetent running for office. Okay, so when was that not the case? Somebody fought over this bill or that bill. The new statistics. It's just like, okay. So I don't read it so much anymore. Unconditioned. If you can memorize and live by it, it can, the moment it is spoken, melt away delusion and errors of accumulated aeons. He's really giving this high praise. What he's saying here is you can use this verse to hit yourself between the eyebrows and remember. Okay? Sometimes when you go on retreats, different ways that this is done. Well, I was talking to a friend of mine who went to one of the retreats, and the retreat was put your mind and attention on this, on your meditation topic, and do not leave it. And it could be, who is this meditating? And you're looking into it. Or you could say, I'm going to hold the Buddha's name unfailingly, just steady, steady, steady. And then to do that, this would happen. So you'd be sitting in the hall. Everybody you're sitting after about 10 minutes, and minds begin to wander. And then, and you would, coming back. It would bring your attention back, right? And he was saying, yeah, I used to go to the bathroom to get away from it. And I was in the bathroom, and there's somebody outside the window. Whoa. And then the lunch came, and I was just about to take my first bite. Boom, boom. Every time, changing clothes, whatnot, that somebody would and intermittently, it wasn't predictable. And every time it came was to remind you, to remind you, to remind you. So the verse, in a sense, is kind of like that. It's a mnemonic device to help you get back to the essential nature. Let's go into it. So he said, it's really, I want to do this because this is fun. So you realize we translated it for content, but not for meter and rhyme. So if you would, Iwan, could you just read the first 4 lines in Chinese? So you hear the Chinese, you're going to hear poetry. When you read this, you're going to get content, but it's not exactly poetry. But go ahead.
迷人修福，不修道；只言修福，便是道。布施供养，福无边。心中三恶，原来造。
Okay, hear the rhythm, hear the, so here's our version. Confused people cultivate blessings, not the way. They just say cultivating blessings is the way. The blessings of charity and donations may be boundless, but the 3 poisons are rooted in the mind. So he's saying, confused people, confused in the sense of this deep, profound teaching, but not confused necessarily in the ordinary way of going out killing, stealing, and raping and pillaging. What he means is cultivators, the confused cultivators, go after blessings. They do good deeds, they're generous, and they practice charity and so forth, and they say, this is the way, this is the Tao. And he's saying, they may do that, and you may get boundless results from that in terms of rewards and if you want to say, good payback. And some people look at this as an investment portfolio. Today I did such and such merit and virtue, a meritorious thing, or I created a blessing by supporting this. And while they're doing that, they're not only conscious that they're doing it with a calculation that this will bring a return, but they also try to let other people know as well, by attaching their name to the donation, right? I said some people, like, right in the middle of the ceremony, the donation box is up here, in the middle of the ceremony, everybody's going, and then somebody comes with a big stiff red envelope, boom, boom, boom. It's like, oh, did I notice who just stuffed the big red envelope in there? Oh, no, it was a humble act. I remember when I was a monk, before Master changed our robes to these, when I was a monk, we used to have the real high ching. These are, the Count Dracula robes. They have the big, long sleeves, look like wings, and they reach down to the ground, and they're hollow inside. So you have a sleeve, and it's like a humongous pocket on both sides. And so when you were a monk at certain things, people would come up and give you red envelopes. And you'd say something like, Gungdo Wuliang, limitless merit and virtue, blah, blah, blah. And you drop the envelope in, you drop it in the other. And you could get a lot of red envelopes in there, and it still looked like you hadn't received anything, right? Then you go back and turn them on, and all these red envelopes come. But sometimes someone would humbly come up and just give a red envelope and say, please use it for the university or something, and drop it in. And somebody else would come up with this huge, big mega envelope stuffed, right? Go, whoa, and everybody, oh my God, look at that, and put it down. But then when you go back, often the little tiny envelope had maybe a $100 bill in it, and this one was stuffed with singles. So I got to see human nature is really interesting about merit and blessings. But anyhow, he's saying that's good, and it may be boundless, and it ensures that by doing good, good comes back to you. You're in a sense using a karmic principle to avoid having bad things happen to you. For example, the texts talk about by practicing generosity and not taking more than your share, in life after life, you'll generally be assured of not being in poverty or want. So by respecting things and not abusing them, and by being generous, you find the blessing of that is in a next life that you have enough, you're not sufficient. Contrarily, if you waste resources or use too much up and are stingy, then the return of that is the opposite. You find yourself wanting and so forth. The texts talk about this, and it's not just the Buddhist text, there's many texts that talk. He's saying that's all fine and good. But he said, the real place you have to get is rooting out the three poisons. The three poisons are referring to what I talked about earlier, which is translated as thirst, trishna. And it has to do, sometimes it's translated as greed, but it's this insatiable longing and wanting. And then the next one is the opposite of it. It's aversion, it's dislike, it's animosity moving away from. This is sometimes simplistically translated as hatred, so it's greed, hatred, and stupidity. But you have to look at this. The greed here is an unquestionable thirst driven by misunderstanding, always wanting, grasping more. The aversion is the opposite side. I want this, but I don't want that. So I'm trying to push away what is unpleasant, what I don't want, and I'm trying to grab and hold on to what I want. This mind is called the dual mind of attachment. So attachment is not only grabbing and reaching for, but it's also trying to push away and avoid. Okay, I don't want to get old. I don't want to have this happen, so I'm trying to push away. And then I grab for the life gusto thing, which leads me to seek for immortality. The third one is sometimes, I think, badly translated as ignorance or stupidity, and it really doesn't mean that. It means misunderstanding, deep unawareness, not seeing things as they are. Avidya is actually in Sanskrit, which means not, vidya, seeing. You're not seeing things clearly, you're filtering them through the first two. And when you filter through the first poisons, then you don't. So this is what it means. So you can see, these are all very personal qualities of mind, of psychology, of personhood. They're not necessarily external acts, and that's the difference here. So he's saying that's where you get the real stuff, working on that ground. Fostering blessings to wipe away errors may bring future blessing, but the errors will still remain, because the errors come from the mind, not come from donation and charity and so forth. Just rid yourself of unwholesome states of mind, self-nature's true repentance and return. So he's saying repentance and return is not something you do every week and say, I'm sorry for blah, 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 please, da-da-da, forgive me, whatnot. He's saying getting rid of the seeds that cause those is the true repentance and reform. So the renewal. So this repentance has to do then, not so much I did so many of these things, but rather how I did them. Doing one sincere act of regret and return, really sincere, and really bringing about a change is probably, I would guess, whereas the 1,000 superficial devotional exercises not done with any inner transformation, but simply either done to go through the motions or done with the idea that I hope somebody wipes my slate clean for me. Then he says, suddenly you realize the true repentance of the great vehicle. Get rid of the false, keep the true, do no wrong. Hey, is that straightforward or simple? Come on. Huh? All of you go home tonight and just say, I got it. I can't remember this verse, and not in Chinese, but not in English, but get rid of the false, keep the true, do no wrong. Okay. I would say hold that one just between the eyebrows. Okay. I know we're all very smart, intelligent people, a lot of masters, PhDs here, but if I can hold that one, get rid of the false. Who? What's false? Let's take a look. Keep the true. And do no wrong. Whoa. Yeah, the world would be a better place if people did that. And I'm well, wait a minute, how about me? It sounds so simple. To learn the way, to learn the Tao, go online and Google it. No, look within. Look within your own nature. Now, this doesn't mean look within like contemplate your navel. That look within means look within your very life, your life circumstance right now and the here and now. It's not an inner meditative state. Look within is to look to the here and now of your existence right now. All the afflictions and all the mistakes are there, as are all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. They're all in that here and now state. Observe your own essential nature. Then you are one and the same with each and every Buddha. Whoa. So I would go for this last 3 lines. Get rid of the false, keep the true, do no wrong. To learn the way, look within. Pretty good. Pretty good. Which reminds me of a story, and I found the story, and I'm going to share it with you, because if I try to do it without going through it completely, I might botch it up. So this is a wonderful story to illustrate this point. Get rid of the false, keep the true, do no wrong. So this is about a character named Bird Nest. That was his name, Bird Nest. So if some of you are thinking of having children, and your first baby, call him or her Bird Nest. Long ago in China, there lived a monk who perched in a certain tree every day to meditate. No matter if the tree swayed in fierce winds and rain, the monk settled himself comfortably high up in the branches. And because of this, he was nicknamed Bird Nest by the village folk nearby. Many of these villagers passed beneath the monk while hunting or while gathering wood in the forest, and after a time, they grew used to him. Now, at first, you can imagine, it's like, oh my, what? But after a while, he's just like there, and it's like became, okay, there he is again, that's old Bird Nest. Some began to stop and talk about their concerns with Bird Nest. They liked the things he had to say, and soon Bird Nest became known for his kind and thoughtful words. No, I mean, this is wonderful. You'd think of people just coming and saying, oh, today I really had this trouble. And say, oh, So Bird Nest became really pretty popular, but part of the village. After some years, the monk's wise reputation spread throughout the province. Visitors from distant cities hiked to the remote forest for advice. Even the governor of the province decided that he, too, would like to visit Bird Nest to discuss matters of importance. Now, any of you have read The Little Prince, La Petite Prince? The Petit Prince, there's these matters of consequence he talks about. So he goes to talk with these people about, but he says they never really talk about important things. They talk about what they call matters of consequence. It's a little bit like Winnie the Pooh, too. Capital M, capital C, matters of consequence. What are you going to be when you grow up? how did that investment do today? You know, like, this is matters of consequence. But this was talking somewhat matters of importance to the governor. So one spring morning, the governor set off to find him. After traveling for several days, he at last located a bird's nest tree in a dense forest. The monk sat calmly high in the topmost branches, enjoying the warmth and birdsong of spring. Looking up, the governor shouted, "Hey, bird nest!" Shouted. "I'm the governor of this province, and I've come a great distance to speak with you. I have a most important question." Now, this is different than the tone of the villagers. Like, yeah. And the governor waited for a reply, but heard only the pleasant sounds of leaves stirring in the breeze. The governor continued, "This is my question. Tell me, bird nest, what is it that all wise ones have taught? Can you tell me the most important thing the Buddha ever said?" There was a long pause, and just the soft rustle of leaves again. Finally, the monk called down from the tree, "This is your answer, governor." Ready? "Don't do bad things, always do good things. That's what the Buddha taught." And the governor was pissed off. He thought this answer was far too simple to walk 2 days for. Irritated and annoyed, he stammered, "Don't do bad things, always do good things? I knew that when I was 3 years old, you stupid monk." And looking down at the governor, Birdnest replied with a wry smile, "Yes, the 3-year-old knows it, but the 80-year-old still finds it difficult to do." Ooh. When it feels difficult to do things, remember to seek this. So that's the answer to the story of Birdnest. I love that story because it matches this line here, but it's sort of like every time I've gone on a retreat and I'm sort of quiet and reflecting about mistakes I've made and whatnot, they never go beyond, really. They never go beyond this. I can have an incredible defense attorney inside making up a case for why I did this and extenuating circumstances and the law, you know, on and on. But bottom line, the conscience of a 3-year-old and the conscience of a 60 or 70 is just as clear on these points as we ever, and we really do know. We really do know. We don't blush as much as we used to, but that's not necessarily maturity. We get better and better at covering it, but in fact, the ramifications through our system are just as profound as when they were 3. So this idea of an innate conscience that is untrammeled, that is untarnished, that's still available, is really important here. So, of course, I remember when I heard this story quite a number of years ago, and it really inspired me, so I thought, I'm going to build myself a bird's nest and go up. And so this was in the early 70s. I was at Stanford, and at that time Stanford had this wonderful view of these beautiful oak and sycamore trees, and nobody was there. And so I got my Jeep, and I filled it with all this good wood, and my hammer and nails, and I drove into there, and I put my ladder up, and I found this perfect place. You know how where you get 3 branches spreading out, so I could triangulate, and I'm hammering the wood and whatnot. And pretty soon I look down, and there's 2 cops standing there. And I said, "Oh, it's okay, I'm a student." "No." "I'm doing a bird's nest." "No." This is not what did they say? This is not authorized housing. And so they made me pull the whole thing down. So that was my one feeble attempt to be a bird's nest. It's not easy. Anyhow, we'll stop for tonight. Announcements? I think we just are finishing up the Guanyin session at the city, right? It ends tomorrow?
The Guanyin session will end tomorrow. Tomorrow also we have Avatamsaka lecture, 7:30 p.m., like always. And on this coming Tuesday in Tian's, it's 4th Street, it will be the event with Reverend Heng Sure. And it starts, I guess, 7 p.m.
Which night is this?
Tian's
Oh,
shop.
Tian's.
Tian's, yes. 4th
Okay.
Street. We can find more information in our website. And I guess the topic of this event will be happiness. You can find the answer for it.
Okay, we'll do our transference. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Ling Li San Bao